Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon & Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Anthony Paluska, Dean McMahon, and today we're joined by Blake Jensen. Blake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Blake is the Senior Director of Professional Services at SOCi. Blake, tell us a little bit and introduce the audience a little bit to yourself, your background, and then we'll dive into a bit about what your team does at SOCi.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anthony. So Blake Jensen, I've been in consulting for about 15 years. A lot started my career as a trader on Wall Street, was in the subway and got out of the basement of the Lehman Brothers building the day that they kind of went under. And through that, really enjoyed the technology side of it a little bit more than the actual trading. Was able to move into a role within or switch companies to a company that did more investment management type software for hedge funds and investment advisors. Really learned consulting on the fly in a technical capacity there. And, then I went 8 years into SaaS consulting at a company called Seismic and followed the CRO and founder of Seismic to where I am today at SOCi.
So that's great. Tell us a little bit about SOCi and what your team focuses on there.
Yeah, awesome. So SOCi is a marketing platform for multi-location brands. And what we like to say is that our AI will help you do the work of 1,000 local marketers. And when my friends ask me, what does SOCi actually do? I say, hey, when you're looking for something, whether that be a gym, whether that be a restaurant, whether that be just a smoothie or a financial advisor, how do you try and find them? First thing they say is they go through social or they go through search to be able to try and find them. And SOCi allows those multi-location brands to manage their reviews, their reputation, all of their listings information, their social, everything within one platform to ultimately drive more traffic to their stores. And my team in professional services, we're specifically focused on implementations, especially we're rolling out new AI agents in our Genius AI model. And we really focus on making sure that our customers are getting the outcomes that they purchased and spending most of our time really delivering on great implementations.
Love to hear it. All right. Thanks for sharing that. So Blake, I want to dive into the topic today. And we were talking about this a couple weeks back even. And this topic I know is a passion point for you. It's one that we've heard a lot about. But even since we spoke, so in the past 3 weeks, I've been to 2 conferences. I've probably talked to 300 people that run professional services organizations. And every single one, the main thing that they wanted to talk about was what their AI strategy is. And everyone feels like they're behind on this journey in some way or another. And if everyone feels like they're behind, nobody's actually really behind on it. But we are all, us included, right, dealing with, okay, there's this evolving landscape of tools that are out there. There's this pressure, real or perceived, that we need to be doing something with all these tools to improve our efficiency. And how do I keep up? And how do I actually know what's going to work? I know it's a topic that you're on every day. How do you view this problem? How do you think about this challenge?
Yeah, and it is an exciting challenge, also a daunting challenge a little bit as well at the same time, right? Keeps me up at night in some regards of it is the future. The pace of innovation is something that we have never seen before. If you go through some of the things on LinkedIn, you're always going to hear everybody saying, it's not going to replace you, but the people using it are going to replace you. And that's great and all. But about 98% of what I see out there is amazing. It's unbelievable if I were an entrepreneur and I owned my own business. But when I look at it for my team, my implementation and consulting team here at SOCi, 98% of what I see doesn't even matter for us, right? It wouldn't even move the needle for us. It wouldn't even move the needle for our business. So I think for me, it's sifting through a lot of that noise like you were at those conferences, because I hate to call it noise. It's unbelievably incredible what it can do, but it doesn't really apply to us. And trying to find the real high value use cases where you say, whoa, okay, that right there, if I can get my team to adopt that and apply that, that's going to make a big impact on revenue or margins, or more importantly, customer experience for our respective business. And for me, it's fun. It's fun to spend 30 minutes watching somebody create a backdrop of New York City on the fly and put a street lamp here and put a new sign here and add people to the street, and you watch it and you're amazed. Then you realize I just spent 30 minutes. That probably doesn't mean anything to me and my business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and for some of the other businesses, I mean, you mentioned if you're an entrepreneur, there's a bunch of these use cases that are both interesting, but also applicable, and not so for PS. The same thing for customer support and for some of these other functions that exist within our companies. But PS does seem to be, and this was a common theme of lots of people that I've talked to about this. PS, finding those use cases is difficult, and you have to find them on the fringes of different things. As you're looking at this, I kind of think about it in three categories of how AI can either help right now or change our business in professional services, either today or in the future. One is like around internal process optimization and improvement. Another one's around the client delivery side of things. And then the third ball there is around, okay, if everybody else is dealing with AI, how do we do some additional solution consulting that attacks that particular problem? Do you see the same three balls? Is there another one? Would you categorize that differently? First question. And then the second question there is, where, if at all, have you seen the most traction within your business?
Yeah, I think the way I like to think about it is, first and foremost, as a consultant, I'm in, SaaS company, and we're implementing on behalf of our client. And I always try and remind people of, like, everything is about the customer experience. So how are we using AI to make for a differentiated, great customer experience that might be different than other vendors, right? So I think about always having the answers to questions, always coming prepared, not making a customer repeat themselves, knowing their business inside and out, having clean handoffs between organizations, so that when you show up at the end of that call, that customer goes, yeah, I don't have to worry about them knowing about me and my business and our outcomes, because they're fully aligned. They know everything about us, and they're on top of their game, right? So I think there's then once you get from that, for me, it's like how does it help our business grow financially, both from a revenue and margin perspective? And I think that's where a lot of that efficiency comes in, of like, how are we using all these tools that I'm spending 4 hours putting together a kickoff deck for our customer so that they get the experience that we just talked about. Well, how do I get that down to 5 minutes to give me my time back, to be much more efficient, to have more projects and things of that nature? And then the third, I think you talked about it, is, our product, our AI, and consulting customers who are in the same position that I might be thinking the same way myself right now, right? Our customers are thinking that as well. And when they get a vendor on the phone, they want that vendor to very clearly articulate the value of our AI and simplify it as well, and be able to consult them through it from their side.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting stresses I hear a lot is particularly in the SaaS business, who always often looks at PS as, can't we just make this simpler and have less of it? And, why does this exist? As opposed to, so if you compare the conversations internally about AI and PS, internally about AI for sales. Sales, it's about how do we equip our people better, make them more effective, support them. Yes, unfortunately, how do we have fewer of them, not increase them as our business grows, and limit to move more self-service with AI? And I think that that's interesting, because it just underlines again where a company is in its experience of understanding how powerful PS is with the customer. It is the stickiness, but we're still stuck in this old, and you and I talked about it recently, the old model of looking at SaaS. We've got to graduate to a new model, and then AI can be very powerful for us, right? Because it can fundamentally make us faster, fundamentally make us better with the customer. And you said one of the biggest problems is these damn handoffs. No offense. But how many times have we been talking to a customer and they go, I've just explained this 8 times, right? And there's probably nothing that makes you feel, matter of fact, I had a company call me yesterday that does one service for me at my home about a new service. And I had a question about the old service. It went so badly, I fired them and hired a new service provider. But it was all about, what do you mean? I don't have that information. I provided it to you, right?
Exactly. And I think that's when we think about sifting through the noise, we think about, for me, the biggest one that relates to me and the one that I'm digging in on the most that could make the biggest impact for a professional services or consulting organization, specifically in SaaS, is we do have that treasure trove of pre-sales information of calls that are being recorded. And then we do have a handoff document of all the questions that we need answered, either from sales or from the customer, so that you don't get the experience that you just had, Dean. When that person calls you, you're like, dang, I want to do more business with them because they know me inside and out. And a lot of times you got to chase people to get that filled out. Well, I've worked with some great people in our organization who focus on trying to get those handoffs filled out, right? So we're not in a bad spot from that regard, but a lot of times sales might answer the question wrong there because the information was asked 3 months ago and they can't really remember it. So I think about taking that treasure trove of information, automating the handoff with the information that we have to populate it better than a salesperson would manually. And then we have that information to then go be able to create our kickoff deck. Because I've even seen it where sometimes people answer the question wrong because, again, the sales cycle dragged on and they asked them 5 months ago and they don't really remember and they populate it the wrong way.
Yeah, and things change.
Yeah.
But getting back to something you and Anthony were talking about a few minutes ago, and I want to make sure I got this. In some ways, we're trying to make AI perform too early in the evolutionary cycle. And that puts pressure on particularly PS again, because internally and externally, they think we know all things, right? And it's going to be as big as mobile phones, right? It's going to be as big as the internet originally, but it's not yet.
Yeah. And it's not yet. But one of the things, a great follow is Jason Lemkin, who owns SaaSter, that has been in the SaaS game forever. And the reason I like to follow and get information from him is he kind of talks real world, like what's going on, right? How the fast pace and innovation of it. And, he is very clear that we are very close. Knowledge work is going out the window a little bit in the sense of we are close to being at a point where there will be an AI agent on a call with you where if someone asks a question and you don't know, there's no more, I'll get back to you. It's let me ask my companion that has access to all of the information of our organization that can help answer that question, because I just personally haven't come across it before and don't know the answer. So there's going to be a lot less like, I'll have to get back to you. The knowledge is there and they'll be able to answer it from that realm. But what it doesn't do is that emotional intelligence of, okay, it answered the question, but what if this client is really upset about something? Can it really understand the emotional intelligence? Let them know, okay, we'll extend this call for another hour. We're really going to dig in and be there. Or you know what? I'm going to hop on a plane. I'm going to come to your, on site with you. I'm going to spend some time with you. And can it do things like that? Can it understand that like your business problem is our business problem? We really want to dig in. We really want to understand. Can't really go to that level.
Imagine
knowledge.
Imagine that as all the firms that had on-premise were going to SaaS, and that the answer from AI was because we can charge you more.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
and that's why, right? That's why SaaS came about. What, hey, why are you doing this to me? Just a minute. Let me ask my partner here. Because we can charge you more.
Yeah, I mean, it's, revenue and margins.
Yeah.
That.
As you said last time we were together, the impersonal sophistication becomes more valuable
Yeah.
over time, because just information not delivered in the right way. I often think and push back on this, when you're with a client and because you've been through it, the challenges they're going to have. You want them to see some of those challenges ahead, but not so much that they're daunted by the challenges, right? You want to keep them motivated. That's all the art of being in a relationship. And I doubt, at least everything I've seen in the projections of AI, that's not their role, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would certainly agree with that from that realm. And I think for me, yeah, I would agree with you there, Dean, for sure.
Well, and so it's funny how you just talked about that, Dane, because I think that what you just described, I mean, the challenges aside, the AI problem, and while I agree with Jason Limkin's statement that you shared earlier, where, okay, we're moving more to this agentic model where all this knowledge work is going away and we're going to have these resources there, that is paralyzing organizations from acting, because they see, okay, that is so far removed from how I'm even designed to operate today. And so we see, okay, we don't even necessarily have yet the strategic alignment necessary to know, okay, what do we want this agent's role to play, right? We can't have them, like Dean just gave the example of, tell the behind the curtain story of why we're doing this, right? But they need to still be armed with all the data and be able to share some of this. So what role do people play versus our agents play in this process? What's the security of this? And that goes even to the simplest things like note-taking and handoffs for client information. What are they comfortable with us having, and how are we storing and securing it? And how is this being used to train other models and all sorts of stuff like that going forward? And then there's the biggest one that I hear pushback on, and I don't know if you've wrestled with this yet either, is data quality, right? My data is not clean enough to put into the system like this. Therefore, I can't possibly move forward until I get my data cleaned up. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer too. If you've played with any of these AI tools, right, you work through that and it continuously iterates and evolves. But strategic alignment, security, data quality, those are big things that stand in between where we are now and this future state model that everybody's selling us on. We're ultimately going to head there. And I think that's why people are just getting either stuck or jumping to, let's just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, rather than being deliberate about it. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot that goes into it. And even before AI agents, the whole, like, my data's a mess. I've dealt with that a lot at, Seismic and previous to Seismic, doing a lot of automation and loading in and handling a lot of data. It's like, if it's an event, very unstructured means, you got to get it into some level of a structured means in order to make sense of it. Right. And, I think that for all of our companies, right, we need to be able to get our data into a means for the AI to even interact with whatever model you're able to use, right? So we talk about that knowledge work. Well, and this is already happening today. It's, okay, well, where does all your knowledge live? Like, is it in Atlassian? Is it in Jira? It is in your education system? Like, where is it all? How can we point to it? And then how can we retrieve all that information in a means that would make sense to a respective customer? And I think that's what a lot of these, especially on the support use case, that's what a lot of them are implementing today. When you think about the Zendesks, the Salesforce, the Genesis, they're doing a lot of that. But compliance keeps me up at night, keeps everybody up at night, because it's so easy to just find some AI tool that's free, use it. And even just like a note-taking app, it's randomly on a Zoom and you're like, no, that can't. I work for a company here. We can't just throw that on here. And you can't just take company data and essentially clients' data and throw it into some random, cool, new, hip AI tool. Like, that's not the way it works. So it keeps you up at night at some levels of making sure that whatever AI tools you are using, does have a compliance layer, is keeping everybody's data secure, and you know which ones that they're taking that information and using it for.
Yeah, on the note-taking app, I have a funny client story there. So we were working with a client just a couple of months ago, and I'm not going to name the name of the actual note-taking app that was on there, but it's named after a bug. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And that becomes important later because somebody joined a call from the client side, and I was on it, and they had this note-taking assistant join the Teams call with us, and then they send out an email afterwards, and it's, hey, if you want the summary of the conversation with key takeaways and all of this stuff, just click here. Well, by clicking there, it actually set it up so that was on everybody's profile now. So now every time they're joining a call, the thing. So we started showing up to calls 3 days later with the client, and there were 10 people on the call and 10 note-taking apps on the call. And then IT shut it down, security compliant. I mean, it was that nobody had any guardrails around this, and so it became known as the infestation because it was the bug that joined. 10 bugs joined every call. But there's those kinds of things that are just completely out there, and it's got. I mean, I am very sympathetic to the compliance teams that actually have to go through and say, okay, what is and isn't allowed here. But what kind of, I mean, how do you weigh that when you're trying new things right now and trying to implement new use cases? And because there's we should go through the exercise of making sure that this is compliant for internal use or for client use, but there's too many to do that with every potential tool out there. So we first have to see, is that tool actually going to be useful for me? And then is it compliant? So how do you balance those couple of things?
Yeah. I think it's when you're in a company, an enterprise, right? We are a $100 million SaaS company. We have procedures that we need to go through to buy enterprise level software, right? And I think you need to think of these AI tools the exact same way. And where you can get a little lost is there are so many, and it's become so easy with free trials of things that you need to be very clear and explicit with your teams of if you're going to go try something for personal use, totally fine. A whole nother game if you're going to be using this for professional use. It's one thing if it's for professional use and you don't have any sort of information or client information or anything like that on that. You need help creating a slide or something along those lines. That's great. But don't take data and upload it to something that we're not working with on our side that hasn't passed our rigorous standards to be able to use. And honestly, when we think about AI adoption and rollout across organizations, what I read is that everybody's far behind. And the reason they're far behind is exactly that, right? You have to go through these very stringent trust processes to be able to buy, to be able to use it. And, with the prevalence of everything being able to be free on demand, I can go use it myself. That's the type of stuff that when trying to roll it out and adopt it, it keeps me up at night a little bit.
Yeah, I was, you guys both know that they use a lot of my data because I survived pancreatic cancer. I was in an interview recently, and I'll leave the hospital out, that was putting together some information as there's some female that have survived. Where I'm right now, I'm the only male. So a lot of data. In the middle of the conversation, it's interrupted by somebody higher up in their organization saying, we've got to turn this off. We cannot use this. These are our personal health. This is Dean's personal healthcare information that can't be used in our AI because it's inside our firewall. In the middle of a conversation, someone is alerted and has to come. And I didn't think about it from healthcare's point of view, but they've got it much worse than the rest of us because it's not organization to organization. It's literally organization to every individual, right? But still, we need to track history of cases, right? We still need that tangible, tactile, what did make this case different, right? So we're just early, but I don't mind going, to your point, I don't mind going slow because our fear is always somebody's data is going to be used incorrectly.
Exactly. That is
that's just
number one fear.
Keep you up at night problem because you want to ruin your credibility. I've actually gone to presentations by other consulting firms years ago where they showed our slides.
Mhm.
and some client, they saw it at some client didn't have our name on it. They used it, they lifted it, and then, that you just don't want that to go on. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think much like there's a lot of cybersecurity type of things that are out there and policies that you're under attacks. It's like, in my mind, I think about it the same way of like, all right, we never in any AI tool whatsoever want to compromise anything to do with any sort of client data, PII data, things of that. I think Salesforce with their Einstein trust layer does a pretty good job of explaining how they're thinking about it from their side of, they have a ton of information, years and years of data that they can use to respond and personalize on support tickets. But when you read a little bit about what they're doing with their Einstein layer, it's pretty impressive. Just being able to strip all of that out, send it out to an LLM model, have it come back in, and then have it run compliance again against that LLM model's response of, did it include vulgarities? Did it have anything of that nature in it? And I think when you read about things like that, it gives you hope, gives you a little bit of promise of like, okay, there's organizations out there really putting the clamps down, compliance around this.
And to your point, that's an enterprise product and an enterprise firm. So listen, and by the way, I just want to say, Blake, there's lots of other topics we want to get you on talking about, and I won't pre-add those, but you had a very exciting view of the movement in customer success organizations that I want to get back to sometime. But today, leave us with a couple of takeaways.
Yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway for me is, as I said, knowledge type of work where how can I do this or asking questions in knowledge. That is probably the biggest place where AI is already here and it's coming, right? So with that, right, there is going to be a heightened expectation of a consultant when you get on the phone with somebody, right? And when you do show up, you need to be able to bring value to that organization. And the one thing you can't do is you can't show up with a bad attitude, because an agent's never going to have a bad attitude with a respective customer, right? And you need to come up and show up to that call really ready to be an expert in that business, prepared, knowing everything about them, and then being able to use both your AI tools and your product to help guide them towards the outcomes that they're trying to get, or else they're going to want to chat with an agent and not really going to want to speak with you. So I think that first and foremost is number one. And number two is, sift through the noise of all the different areas that's out there, and don't worry about 95% of it not relating to you. Chip away and find that one use case that's really valuable, right? Johnson & Johnson said 85% of all the experiments they did with AI didn't mean anything. They were useless. And 15% of them were the most high value, so they went with those, right? Pick that one high value use case for you and your team. Like for me, it's that automation of the handoff and kickoff decks, and take that and run with it and, have some fun with it from that realm.
Yeah, so I love the both of those. The second one in particular, though, just help get everybody a step ahead. So walk us through, if you don't mind sharing, right, the workflow that you have for those kickoffs, the tools that you use there, just kind of how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have note-taking apps like Clary pre-sales that we have. That's also used for forecasting internally, right? So we're keeping all of that information and data in those recordings. We are using right now more of Google Documents for taking that information and doing it a little bit manually right now with our teams to fill out all of those KYC documents. But, with Google and with the Gemini type of tools that they have, turning that document into that kickoff document there as well, right? Utilizing Google Slides and Google Decks on our end, right? So within that, right, we have a lot more tools like Slack that we're using for our channels. I know that's Dean's favorite word, but using Slack to be able to create the channels. So there's automations from Clary to Slack to Salesforce as our tool there. So from my end, we have all these tools, and we're still in the early stages of working through, trying to figure out ways in which we can automate that.
Great. Yeah. And then you mentioned you're on the Google Suite. Are you using primarily Gemini as your LLM for that, or some of the subsets of that, like the Notebook LM or any of those different things yet?
Yeah, primarily Gemini, and I think that's even itself is going through a rigorous test on our team internally, which they should, right? So just making sure that all of the Gemini tools are going to meet the standards to be able to roll out everybody across the firm.
Yeah, I recently have heard that Notebook LM, which is powered by Gemini's whole platform, is the one that people are seeing a lot more, especially in professional services, a lot more use cases out of, because the ability to organize and train it only on your set of content so that it doesn't get all pull in information that might either contradict or conflict with or just be unnecessary for what you're trying to solve for. So
the Google Suite is actually pretty impressive with the the means to create the templates for notes and action items that you can then use integrated to be able to email out to a customer afterwards as well. And again, Clary's like our more of our note taking tool, but bringing them all together, especially from like a project management front of like notes, action items here in this document that we can collaborate on out to an email afterwards, and just being much more efficient around all that.
Yeah. Summarizing some of that stuff, project management, and then the other big use case that people have been using it for, no surprises, testing, right? Software testing, absolutely. And that sort of thing. So, Blake, we appreciate it. Appreciate you spending the time on this topic. I think it's one that if we recorded it a month from now, we would talk about different things, even though we'd be on the same topic. And so Dean mentioned bringing you back to focus on new topics, but maybe we do a recurring series just on this topic and compare notes on how far things have evolved every quarter or something like that. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I tell you what, like continuing education, I think we've all had like a certification. We do that like yearly or every 2 years, continuing education. I feel like in this, it's like all right, give me my daily recap with the way things are changing and evolving.
Yeah, it's truly continuing rather than episodic re-education. It's every day you're getting educated further and further. So, Blake, thanks for the time. Enjoyed the conversation. We'll see you next time. Yeah, that is just the topic right now that everybody wants. It is consuming all PS leaders' time, all organizations' focus. It is the all-consuming problem, which is how do we deploy AI effectively so we do not fall behind our competition? And it does feel like a little bit of a keeping up with the Joneses on this topic, because there's a lot of smoke, but not a lot of fire yet around what actually is working for professional services. There's tons of real good use cases for customer success and for support and things like that, but PS does feel like it's quite a bit behind. So it was interesting and refreshing to hear Blake's perspective on that, some of the things that they're finding, but also hopefully gives everybody else out there the reassurance that, hey, we're all kind of in this together, trying to find our way to the right use cases and struggle through the budget and the compliance and the strategic alignment decisions there. So glad we were able to go deep on this topic.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time with CEOs, and I would divide them into two classes on this. It's tech and non-tech, or I would say high tech and non-tech. High tech, they're all consumed with this because they love waves, and waves help them sell more stuff. And they're trying to make this into a wave to sell more stuff. Non-tech or mid-tech or old tech, whatever you want to call it, don't care at all. Don't care at all.
Yeah, there's probably some of that. I would
whatever it is.
Yeah, and I would classify them, and maybe there's probably a 2x2 here or something, but there's also are you a product-centric firm or are you a client-centric firm? And that'll tell you how you're going to approach this topic. So assuming you're on the AI topic, if you're product-centric and you are, maybe you came out of engineering, maybe you were the founder of this, like a lot of these tech organizations, your view of PS and therefore AI is kind of, yeah, how do we strip as much out of here? How do we automate as much of the experience? The point you were on earlier, if we're client centric, we're at least thinking about it a little differently. That says, how do we improve the overall customer experience? How do we have an AI agent sit next to our consultant so that we have answers to those questions in real time, so that we give the better customer experience like we know and understand them. So there is a do you care about this topic or not, right? Is it the main thing for you? And then how do you care about this topic kind of falls into two camps as well.
Yeah, and if we're going to do 2x2s, I have one for you.
Oh, let's go.
The 2x2 is on one side, do you care about it? The other one is, are you trying to build a business or a transaction?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're trying to make a transaction, you look at all this stuff differently. It's, and no offense to our community, but executives trying to do a transaction, look at everything differently, and it's got a short-term window. And that window is, what does this look like for somebody else to put money into it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that could cause you to look at headcount differently. Then it could make you more, and your 2x2, less customer focused.
There you go. We need a 2x2x2. The cube. We'll call this episode the cube. Trying to understand
it's
the
a
cube.
new thing, the Consultant's Way AI Cube. But it is fascinating, and I do believe that it's going to be gigantically changing of the world we have over time, and not that much time. But I also hope that as many technological changes have, it drives more opportunity, not less opportunity, because we're inevitably, and take manufacturing, it takes a lot less people to make chips, and I mean edible chips now, not a lot less people to make cars, a lot less people to make everything. We have to have a vibrant middle class in this world. And, if tech becomes less people, there's a road that we read a lot about and we don't understand yet either. But anyway, he's a great guy and very knowledgeable and fun to talk to, and we will have him back.
Yep. And I will, this is a topic that fits into a broader theme. We didn't get to dive into it, Blake, but I'll leave kind of the audience with this point, which is, it seems like on every topic right now, if you're a professional services leader in tech, you are trying to do something different with your business, right? Your business is transforming in some way. Either your customers pulling you in a direction, either AI is pulling you in a direction, either your competitors are doing something. Your business is in more states of change than I've seen in all the years of interacting with professional services leaders in technology. And the answer continues to be, every time I talk to somebody about it, jumping straight to enablement. So from a training perspective, we see it a bunch, right? Okay, I want to train on these topics. Okay, from an AI perspective, I want to implement these use cases. From a new offers perspective, we need to be doing this, this, and this for our customers. And that is 2 steps beyond where most of the organizations are. Because if you started, there's not clear internal organizational alignment about what the role professional services actually wants to play. That goes back to our cube a little bit, and then that, assuming you're transforming, has some sort of growth lever, either growing margin or growing revenue. Okay, what's your actual plan to get there? What customers, what segments, how much come from your sales team, how much come from existing accounts? Actually understanding the markets you want to participate in and what you do. And then you can go and say, okay, well, now that we understand our role is X and our strategy to achieving that role and our targets is Y, well, now we can inform the enablement aspects of things. Because we're just, in a lot of cases, we're firing blind at stuff. And there's some stuff you can do from an enablement perspective all the time, but we've got to take a step back here, because we as professional services community seem to be jumping out to trying to answer the question before figuring out what the question actually is.
Yeah, and to leave with this, one of our big pressures for the PS organizations is, if you look at the we already talked about standard work to creating things that allow people to think, we actually want them to be an agile, sufficient group that leverages best practices in consulting to allow that. That allows transitions to happen a lot better. And so we're hoping that over time we all adopt this. Let's have our people fully developed so that as these confluences come, and they're going to continue to come, because the SaaS model that was built over the last decade is no longer the model to go forward for sustainability of those companies.
Yeah.
So that's going to end up PS being, I think, more valuable, more important, more sticky, but agility really matters.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think most organizations will find themselves there at the end of this transformative period, however long it lasts for them, but some won't. And getting clarity on what your role is now is the first step in that journey. And you should advocate for PS to play that role and for doing all those things. But if you're an organization where that's not the case, well, you're just on a different journey, and that's fine.
You're on the same journey, but to your point, you're just wandering around till you either explode, get bought by somebody else who's on that journey, or you discover that journey. And for us, it's exciting, but it's also heartbreaking. We care so much about these people. Yeah. Anyway,
all right.
Anthony and I don't talk for the next 4 hours about this. Take us home, Anthony.
Yep. If you enjoyed this, or at least the front end of this conversation, follow us on YouTube, subscribe on your podcast channels. We'll make sure we push these out to you. We are shifting, at least for a short period of time, to twice a week, so you don't want to miss one. So subscribe now. Also, if you want to connect with us, you can find us at our individual LinkedIn pages, or you can always email the show at podcast@consultantsway.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.